There we go. Good evening, everyone. Give the room a chance to populate here. As always, if you would like to participate in the question and answer, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook and just answer the question. All you have to do is give them your credentials and I'll see your name. And if I see a question with a name associated with it, I'll be happy to answer it. It's been a good day today. It's been raining a little bit around here, which we desperately needed. It's keeping the dust down a little bit. I did a lot of work on my track today. A backhoe and a front end loader are wonderful things to have if you want to build a little backyard track. Also got on my Instagram account today and on my Facebook page, I posted up some photos of a really nice little climb road boot that I got in the mail yesterday. I ordered them up last week from the Amazon store, Climb's Amazon store, which is super fast, by the way. And those things are awesome. Doesn't have anything to do with the tour of Idaho, so I'm not going to spend very much time talking about them tonight, but I will be doing a review on motorcyclejazz.com of these boots. Kind of fits into a niche that is much needed when it comes to boots for road bikes, because most boots that have pretty good protection are too much. You know, you don't, when you're on your street bike and you get off, you walk into a restaurant or a grocery store or something, you don't want to look like, you know, you're wearing a set of space boots. At least I don't. So these things are like Climb's armored jeans or Kevlar jeans and everything else. They look just like kind of normal clothes. So it looks like a set of casual boots, but these things are really nice. They're comfortable as all get out. They've got good protection. They're pretty tall. My guess is a little over 6 inches. True to size, I wear a size 13, and they fit right out of the box. And the shifter pad is really nice. It's a really cool-looking shifter pad, and it's pretty comfy. So I'm going to try to go on a big ride tomorrow. Don't know if I'll take the Ducati or the Super Duke out, but one way or the other, I think I'm going to try to get out tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, Wednesday, and check them out. But they're nice boots. I knew that if Climb ever got serious about boots, they'd make a strong showing, and they certainly have. Both the boots that I've gotten from them in the past few weeks are really good products. All right. Hey, Mark, how are you doing, buddy? So, and I see Jeffrey Jensen in there. Jeff, I may be calling you up a little later, buddy, because if I go on a road trip tomorrow or the next day, I'm planning on stopping and catch him for lunch. So I'll be looking you up. David Green, hello. David, I've got something for you here, and I think I told you last week I had something for you, but I didn't tell you what it was. I got a cool T-shirt. Thanks again for showing up to the lead draw cleanup. I really appreciated that. Paul Peterson, how you doing? Sean Smith. See, I already see a question there. Let's see what it says. Sean, I forgot to ask Leek while Josh was on, do you or anyone else local know if Les Schwab can change tires with bibs? You're on your own when it comes to that. I mean, they'll take care of them if they have tubes in them, if it's a regular tire. But if you are on, if you have bibs in them, you're going to be on your own. Mark Stewart, visiting Alex in Austin this week. Make sure you tell him I said hello and tell him to expect a call from me soon. All right, so let's get started tonight. I bought my kid a drone, and if I get done early enough and it's not storming outside, there's some storms that look like they may roll through a little later on tonight. After this is over, we may go out and fly his drone for a little while. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to talk day 6 this week. I had hoped to have the girls from the village at North Fork on tonight, but that's not going to happen. There was a little bit of a snafu there. I'll try to have them on a little bit later on. But let's talk about day 6 this week. But before we do that, there have been some interesting questions about bikes appropriate for the tour that people have PM'd me this week. Hey, Richard. So I want to answer some of those questions. Now, in some cases, the questions have already been answered. There's a lot that's been written both on the pages of motorcyclejazz.com that deal with the Tour of Idaho and over in the forum. There's a ton of information about what bikes are appropriate for the tour and what are not. Generally speaking, I stay out of that because it's like everything else. People ask me a question, I tell them what I think is the right answer, and then I spend the rest of the time listening to why I'm wrong. So, bring any motorcycle you want. You got a Harley Davidson Pan American you think is good for the tour, you go knock yourself out. But the gentleman that asked this particular question had obviously read everything that was on Motorcycle Jazz. And, he sent a really, really good, thoughtful PM. And I think what precipitated his question was the conversation with Jimmy Lewis a few weeks ago. And it was about how appropriate is two-stroke for the Tour of Idaho. So, once again, I am an anecdote. I am a single data point. So I'm going to tell you what I like for the Tour of Idaho and why I like it. And then it's up to you. You do with that information what you want. The one thing is I don't want to hear any arguing about it. The first person that says you're wrong about that, I'm going to find you and I'm going to give you a noogie. And it's going to hurt. Because I'm not, I try to tell everybody, I try to prepare you as best as I can for what's coming up. It's up to you whether or not you want to listen. A lot of this stuff is personal anyway. What I like in a motorcycle may not be what you like, but that doesn't make either of us right or wrong. It's just sometimes it's a matter of preference. An interesting aside, a lot of motorcycle people are highly resistant to new information. It's the damnedest thing in the world. I've never figured it out. But I've encountered it before because climbers are the exact same way. You get a person who's been climbing for a decade or so, and you try to talk to them about a route that you know really well that they're about to do, and they'll be like, yeah, I got it. And it's pretty obvious sometimes they don't got it. All I'm going to tell you is this. The Tour of Idaho is unlike anything you have ever done before. There is no template for it. And, you can go out and ride little bits and pieces of it, which a lot of people do. It's not against the rules. We encourage you to do that, to go out and pre-ride sections of it. But it's still not like the Tour of Idaho. I see guys go out and they say, yeah, I rode, 75 miles of single track today, and on a fully loaded tour bike. That's not even a short day on the Tour of Idaho. Short days on the Tour of Idaho are around 200 miles, and there's 10 of them. So it is unlike anything you've ever done. I was talking to some friends of mine the other day, and, I was watching the Sonoran Rally because I know some people that went down there. And some friends of mine were involved, and I was kind of looking through the results, and I noticed a lot of familiar names. There were an awful lot of people that finished that Sonoran Rally, and you were rightfully proud of themselves. Good for you. You done good. That kind of stuff's tough. But in those lists of names, there were some people that have shown up here the last few years to do the Tour of Idaho and didn't even make it halfway through day one. So a lot of the things that that people think will prepare them for the Tour of Idaho won't. So we try to tell you, I and others will try to tell you. I noticed at the forum, there's lots of people giving pretty good advice in the forum. All we can do is tell you, and all we can do is try to explain to you that this really isn't like anything else. So the stuff that worked for you in Baja or worked for you in Sonora or worked for you in the Trans-America Trail, the BDR, is probably not going to work on the Tour of Idaho. And if it were me, I would listen to people that have done it, in some cases, many, many times and know it very well. People are not trying to put you down. They're not trying to pretend like they know more than you or anything else. What they're trying to do is set you up for success because all of us know how bad it hurts. With all of the effort that you put into this, if you get into day 4 or 5 and you got to bail, there's nothing that sucks worse than that. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want you to get DQ'd. We don't want you to have a mechanical that you could have avoided. So having prefaced my remarks about bikes, this is what I'm going to tell you. You want the lightest street legal motorcycle you can get, as long as you can get it licensed anywhere. And Idaho is a really easy place to get a bike licensed. As long as you can get a plate on it. And in Idaho, that means you got to have a headlight, a taillight, and a working brake light. That's it. That'll work in Idaho. Most of you come from states where the licensing is more strict. Any street legal bike that you have that's super lightweight will work. Anything that weighs much over 300 pounds without a bunch of stuff on it is probably not appropriate for the Tour of Idaho. I've ridden some pretty heavy bikes. I rode a 650R, but that was on an earlier version that didn't have as much technical stuff as the version now does. And it was appropriate for the earlier versions of the Tour because the earlier versions of the Tour featured super long days, but not as much technical stuff. There was a lot of faster stuff. But the last few times I've done it on a 450X, a Honda 450X. And the next time I do it, I will do it on a KTM 350 4-stroke. I have a KTM 300, and I love that bike, but I wouldn't do the Tour of Idaho on it for two reasons. One is that you would shag the bike completely. You'd have to do a rebuild. You'd have to start out with a fresh motor, and you'd need a motor when you were done. The second is that there's no way I could stand the smell of two-stroke exhaust for 10 days in a row. You'd pass out because some of these long uphill climbs, you're going pretty slow, and after a while, I think that you you would choke on two-stroke fumes. Now, I know that some people have done it, and you know what? Good. I think that's great. There have been at least a half a dozen people that have finished on two-strokes, some really strong riders, and we talked about it going in, and they did just fine. But I think they did all shag their bikes in the process of doing it, but they knew that going in. And they have a higher tolerance for toxic fumes than I do, I guess. I think four-stroke bikes are the best, but again, that's personal. That's me. And again, I'm an anecdote. I'm a single data point. But I would do it on something like a KTM 350, I think, is the ultimate tour bike. And there are a lot of those that show up. That's probably the single most popular bike. And right behind that's a KTM 500. Those are, that bike weighs maybe 20, 25 pounds more. And it's a really good motorcycle. Something like that will work just fine. There have been a lot of betas showing up lately. So that's me. I'm going to ride a four-stroke 350. I'm going to find one in the next year or so here and start building it up for my next tour when I get around to doing it again. But the most important thing is that the thing be in good mechanical shape and it kind of be set up for the tour. We've had a lot of people show up in the last few years that were racers, and racers, by the way, don't have an enviable record on the Tour of Idaho. Really strong trail riders who also race do, but people that just come from a race background, they don't get it. A lot of them crash out too early, or they show up on bikes that aren't jetted or built appropriately for what you're going to get into. And we've seen a lot of that the past few years. We've seen people that showed up. I've seen bikes that were just, jetted crazy lean, had a lot of power and stuff, but you just smoked the motor. Geared too high, stuff like that. Make sure that your bike is set up for trail riding. We've talked about suspension before. I'm going to try to get Alex Martins back on here in another few weeks to talk to you about suspension specifically for the tour. Make sure you've ridden it with the heavy stuff on it that you're going to be carrying. Get yourself a set of giant loop Mojaves. Tie all the stuff on that you're going to take it out, ride it around. Make sure that, you start out with a fresh chain. Make sure you start out with fresh sprockets. Or if you don't, make sure that you buy all that stuff on your day off in Pocatello. I tell everybody my plan is always to just run what you brung on day one, because day one's really hard on tires. You'll shag a fresh tire on day one all by itself. So if I had a tire that was in reasonably good shape, I'd ride it on day one. If I had chains and sprockets that were in reasonably good shape, I'd ride them on day one, and I'd have all that stuff changed out at Power Sports on my day off in Pocatello. That way you start on day two with everything fresh. That's not a bad plan at all. You can get them to change your oil there if you want to. So that's the way I would do it. Different people do things different ways, but there's certainly nothing wrong with the way I've done it, and it's worked for me about 6 times. So there you go. So hopefully that answers questions about bikes. The tour is not appropriate for a big, heavy dual sport bike. You're just not going to make that work. You need something pretty light. People ask me about 690s and things like that. Too heavy. There's one out in my shop. I've ridden around. I love it, but I wouldn't do the Tour of Idaho on it. You might get away with, a day or so on something like that, but over the course of 10 days, you are going to get the crap beat out of you. And every single extra ounce that's on that motorcycle is going to wear you out, because every time you make a direction change, you have to supply some muscular effort to make that bike change direction. And the more mass that bike has, the more that's going to wear you out. A smaller, lighter motorcycle over the course of time is going to beat you up way less, provided it's suspended correctly, than a big, heavy bike. That's just all there is to it. Dude, not just day 6, any day would kill a big bike. Jim Spooner, how are you? Damon, how are you? I'm seeing, boy, we got all kinds of people in here tonight. So hopefully that answers the gentleman's question about two-stroke bikes. I think two-strokes are fine. If you want to bring your two-stroke, as long as you understand you're going to need to start with a fresh engine and you're going to need one when you finished. and you're going to get mighty sick of smelling two-stroke exhaust, I think, then I think it's just fine. Brent Asper did it on I think he had a 300. Jeffrey Jensen's done it on a 250, and there have been others. They did just fine. They had no problems. And the nice thing about two-stroke is they're super light, and it probably beats you up less than anything, especially the 300, which doesn't have as much of that on and off, on the pipe, off the pipe kind of power delivery as some others do. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of day 6. Let me get up my map here. Screensaver. Come on. Day 6, we changed a little bit this year. Now my map won't come up. Here we go. Come on now. We changed it a little bit over last year. Last year, we took soloists basically straight up to, here we go. Oh, darn it. Last year, we took soloists basically straight up to North Fork, and we had everybody else kind of ride through the mountains down to the Salmon River Road. This year, everybody is going to take basically the same route to North Fork. There is a 3-team variant. Here we go. All right, finally. There's a 3-team variant that's a little different, but let's just get into it. As I mentioned last week, the nice thing about day 6 this year is I shortened it. I took a big chunk out and I made it optional. And if it were me, this would be the first bonus section I would think hard about doing. Hello, Ralph. We talked a little bit last week about strategy for bonus sections. You don't need to do any bonus section unless something goes wrong, unless fire closes a trail, or unless you can't get across a trail because it hasn't been sawed or something like that. There's enough points built into the challenge point system that as long as you ride your route, if you're a 2-person team, if you ride the whole 2-person route, you're going to finish the Tour of Idaho. Soloists, 3-person teams, if you just ride your route, you're going to finish. But not infrequently, that becomes problematic. A fire is in the way. So we will allow you to ride around the fire. We don't require that trail anymore. But any challenge points that are out there, you would have missed, and you're going to have to make them up. And riding these bonus sections is the best way to do it. Or you can ride extra challenge sections. But again, when you are talking about riding these bonus sections, that's something you don't have to do. And as I mentioned last week, your goal is to survive every day. It doesn't do you any good to ride all the challenge section, all the bonus sections on day 1 if you don't make it to Pocatello by midnight. It doesn't do you any good to ride them on the day going into Chalice, day 4, because if you screw up and you get into Chalice super late, you're not likely to make it into Salmon the next day, at least in time to do you any good. So you have to really be time sensitive. You have to set a goal. If I'm here by this time, then maybe I can think about it if I'm feeling good. But on day 6, I took what used to be a regular part of the route and I made it a bonus. And this is the first one that I would really think about. But once again, it's time sensitive. So everybody's going to go out of Salmon this year. You're going to head due north on 83, and then you're going to go up into the mountains a few miles out of town. It's waypoint 6D-XYZ1. It's just south of Carmen. And you're going to head up into the mountains. It's a really curvy road. It's really kind of pretty, but you got to be careful because there's a lot of side-by-side traffic on this road. You'll head up to 6D-XYZ3, and there's a road that goes off to the rider's left up a hill. If you miss it, you can eventually, there's all kinds of roads up there that keep connecting, winding around back and forth. And they're all on the base map that's in the Voyager Pro, at least the one that I have. So if you get lost, you can eventually find your way to any waypoint, probably on a different road. You go down to, let's see, what is it? 6DXYZ5. And that's your first challenge point for the day. It's Wallace Lake, and it's really pretty looking down into Wallace Lake. Now, most of you will probably be there right as the sun's coming up because you're going to get a good early start out of Salmon. But as I mentioned last week, the day is short enough that if you need to get up early in the morning, go see Josh at Les Schwab, get your tires taken care of in the morning. That's an option now, and that's the reason that I shortened day 6 a little bit. I wanted to give everybody that option. I also wanted to get people into North Fork a little earlier because they close at 9 o'clock, and last year there were a lot of teams that were getting in at like 9:30 and 10 o'clock at night. So I knocked about 3 hours of trail off that should get you into North Fork much earlier. So you're going to head down to 6DXYZ6. That's the old Leesburg stage road. You're going to head down to Leesburg. You go down past some old mines, and eventually you will come to 6DXYZ. Let's see, 6DXYZ8. And there's the soloist and two-person variation goes on down. What the heck's the name of that creek? Let me blow this up and see if I can see it. I can't remember the name of the creek, but anyway, it's 60XYZ8. The two and solo variation, they continue to go to the southwest, but the three-person variation branches off, climbs up on a ridge, and goes down into Deep Creek. The three-person variant is actually kind of cool. It takes a lot longer. Napius, thank you, David. Napius Creek and Sean. So most of you are going to go down Napius Creek. The three-person teams have to go up onto the ridge and then ride down Deep Creek. Last year, we allowed soloists and two-person teams to ride up a level if they wanted to get an extra point. Again, this year we cut all that out, so there's no more poaching an easy point by taking the three-person variation. Soloists and two-member teams have to go down Napius Creek. Everybody and the three-person teams have to go up to Deep Creek. Everybody is going to eventually hit the road that's going down Panther Creek, and you're going to ride a long ways, much longer than I wish we could ride, until you get down to the Salmon River Road. The real crazy thing about this is there actually is a really nice way that's got a bunch of single track and quad trail that gets you down into the Salmon River up over Pine Creek, but there's about a mile of it that's illegal. There's a mile that's closed. They've been working on the Forest Service trying to get that open. So hopefully in the future we can take out that long drone down Panther Creek Road. Also, Panther Creek Road is possibly the most dangerous road on the entire tour of Idaho. Do not go bombing down that road at 60 miles an hour. If you're going to do that, make sure you're doing it at night so at least you can see headlights coming the other way. Because it's pretty curvy. There's a lot of people, especially at the north end when you start getting close to the Salmon River. And basically everybody that's coming at you, you should assume that around every corner there is either a Jeep load or a UTV load of drunken hillbillies sliding sideways who are actually out to kill you. If you make that assumption going around every corner, you might live. But I have had more close calls going down that road than just about any place else along the tour. There's one other place on day 7 that I'm going to tell you next week to watch out for. But please be careful going down Panther Creek. You hit the Salmon River Road, and the thing that I would be careful of on the Salmon River Road, it's paved, but the speed limit's only 35. I mean, it's really easy to be hauling ass up that road. You might want to watch it a little bit because they do patrol that road. And I have heard of people getting tickets, doing 60, 65 going down that road, which is easy to do. And all of a sudden you see a set of blue lights in your rearview mirror. So you ride a long way. It's like, gosh, it's almost 20 miles, I think, up to North Fork. And a question comes up every year. Why do I have to go all the way to North Fork? Well, you don't. I mean, you can skip it if you want to. It's a long way without gas. The thing about North Fork that's nice is you get, if you go to North Fork, you can get gas. Also, you can drop your gear there. You don't need to take very much on the rest of the day. So we set this up assuming that you would get to North Fork early in the afternoon. The ladies there will take care of you. They'll probably have your room all ready. If not, you can drop your gear there somewhere and they'll watch it for you. It's really nice to be able to drop a lot of stuff at North Fork, eat lunch, gas up your bike, and take off on a lightly loaded bike to do this big loop that goes around the North Fork store. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do it. At 60XYZ17, knock yourself out if you don't want to go to North Fork. There was a team a couple years ago that were like all offended that I made them go to North Fork. And I said, you don't have to go to North Fork at all. It just makes sense to do it. That's why that route is in purple there. It's optional. But that's an allowed option. You are encouraged, in fact, to go to North Fork, drop as much of your stuff as you can, fill up, eat lunch, and then have a really pleasant afternoon. The afternoon trails in Day 6 are flat out my favorite of the entire tour of Idaho. They're some of the best trails in the entire state. You're going to love them. You might as well get yourself a nice lunch, hydrate, and go out and have some fun that afternoon on a lightly loaded bike. It's your only opportunity to do that. Now, once you head up Sage Creek, you get to 6DXYZ18 and you start heading up the hill. There's all kinds of little roads that branch off. In just about every corner, there's a little road that goes off somewhere. Most of them don't go very far. Just stick to what looks like the most well-established road. I've never gotten lost going up there, but a lot of people get lost going up the Sage Creek Road. It's the biggest obvious road. It's a big road, too. You can drive big logging trucks up and down this road. So anytime that you're going up, and if you come to an intersection there, it's the biggest road. That's the one that you want. You go way up the hill, 60XYZ19, and you do an out and back to Ulysses Mountain. I always climb up into the lookout. You don't have to if you don't want to. The steps scare little people. They look a little rickety, but I've made it all the way up there, and it looks fine. It's an awesome picture if you can get up in there. I think somebody told me last year that the door might have been locked, but the last time I was there a couple of years ago, I didn't have any trouble getting into it. You head back 60XYZ19, you head north to 60XYZ21. You come up at this weird like five-way intersection. And this is the one place where it's not the most obvious route. The most obvious routes kind of stay on Sage Creek Road. And what you're doing is sort of taking the second left. It's a real weird five-way intersection. The most obvious way is right in front of you, and it starts going back down a hill. And then there is to your immediate left, at about 11 o'clock, there's an obvious quad trail that goes up a hill. And then the next left, at about 10 o'clock, is a logging road that goes around a corner. So you want to take the second left, the one that's at about 10 o'clock. And that'll take you out around to 6DXYZ22. It's 6DXYZ22, and the waypoint is exactly where it needs to be. The road keeps going, but there's a hard right at about 3 o'clock that goes steeply up a hill. And it's a nice road, but it's pretty doggone steep. And that will take you up to Indian Peak. Indian Peak is one of the coolest places on the tour. It's a wonderful view, and you kind of have to know the geography of the area a little bit, but you can really see a lot of Idaho from the top of that hill, and you can see a lot of the tour. You can see where you were 3 days ago if you know exactly where to look, and you can see where you're going to be going for the next couple of days. It's really pretty up there. Once you get off of Indian Peak, you're going to head downhill, and you head sort of across kind of a bench for a while to 6DXYZ25 and then 6DXYZ26. And that's all dirt road. You get up to about 6DXYZ27. Is that right? No, it's 6DXYZ26, I think. One of those, I haven't looked at the aerial photos in a while. I'm pretty sure it's 26. Just make sure you go to each waypoint, because there's a road and the little trail, which is what the heck's that ridge called? Butcher Knife Ridge. The Butcher Knife Ridge Trail is real easy to ride past, but there's a waypoint right on the trail. And so if you just make sure that you pay very close to the exact location of the waypoints there, it'll guide you off of the road down onto the trail. There is a trail sign there, but it's down off the road a little ways, and it's almost to the trees. And so I've ridden past it a couple times before. It's not, I mean, it'll be pretty obvious because the road ends after a little while, but you don't want to waste any time. So in that 6DXYZ 25, 26 area, just make sure you roll right over the waypoints, and if you do, you'll get on the single track trail. Butcher Knife Ridge is a really nice trail. It goes out through an old burn area. It's a burn scar. And so there's a bunch of dead trees out there. I've seen pictures of people up there cutting on it so far this year, so I think that it'll all be sawed. I will certainly be up there in a couple weeks myself to ride most of this stuff. So I'm pretty sure that this will all be sawed by the time you guys get there. And when it's sawed, it's really nice. So you go out, there's just really spectacular views along this trail. It's the world's easiest single track trail too, except for the very, very end. It's a place where I take my kids on their 100s, and I run into locals up there all the time. I ran into the gentleman up there a few years ago that runs cattle, has the permit from the Forest Service to run cattle up there. And he was with his little girl who was about 10 years old, and she had a set of pink cowboy boots on, and they both had rifles strapped over their backs. She was on a little 100, he was on a 250, and it was like one of the most awesome motorcycle encounters in the woods ever. So you're going to get out just short of 60 XYZ 29, where you're starting to climb up onto the Continental Divide Trail. There's a little steep section, and if you just keep on the gas, you won't have any trouble with it. Just don't slow down in the middle of any of those steep sections, because they put water bars on the trails, and because of erosion, some of those water bars are a little steep to get over, so you got to hit them with a little bit of speed sometimes. You get up on the Continental Divide Trail, and Montana's off to your left, Idaho's off to your right. It's a wonderful trail that you ride for a few miles. There's another challenge point up there. There's a monument with a cross on it. Monument made out of rocks with a wooden cross stuck on the top of it. That's a challenge point. Brian DeLinge of IDPR and I were riding up there a few years ago with saws to clear all this stuff, and a bolt of lightning hit between us. I was about 100 yards ahead of him. We were riding along that trail, and a great big bolt of lightning hit right between us. Storms in that area come up really fast, especially if they're coming in from Montana. And it looked like a pretty clear day to me, and then within 5 minutes, we could see these big clouds starting to roll up over the ridges and stuff, and the next thing I know, there was a big boom and a big bright flashlight. It looked like the sun was coming up, and we could smell ozone. And I didn't see it because it was behind me, but it was in front of Brian. So if it's storming, get across there pretty quick. That's a known lightning strike area. Down around 60 XYZ 30 and 31, it's a little easy to get lost down there. The trail is not completely obvious in a couple of spots, but if you need to, just get off the bike and look around, and you'll see sometimes it just gets a little overgrown. You're looking for a trail that exits the ridge. You don't stay on the ridge up there. The trail actually goes down off the ridge, goes down into a big gully, and eventually climbs back up onto the ridge. And it climbs back up onto the ridge at about 60 XYZ 30 or 31, excuse me. Is that right? Yeah. There's a really nasty high-effort switchback up there that at some point we'll have to get up and fix. It's the only real gnarl on day 6. The rest of the trails are really great, but there's one switchback up there around between waypoint 30 and 31 it's real high effort. And most of you will probably get off and end up pushing your bike around it. That's the prudent thing to do. So you get up around 60 XYZ 32, and the Continental Divide Trail continues to go off to the northeast. You want to make a turn there, and it's a very well-marked turn, or at least it was the last time I saw it. You're going to head down to 60 XYZ 33. There is a challenge section that starts really close, just a little bit north of 60 XYZ 33, and it's marked. That's a really nice challenge section, and you're going the right way. You're going downhill. It's got some switchbacks in it. There's some side hilling. It's pretty bumpy. I like that trail. It's a really scenic trail, but it does take significantly longer than the regular trail. So here's what I would think about if I were you. It is a really nice challenge section to do because it's so scenic and you're going in the right direction. It is technical, but you're going downhill. Riding up it is a bear, but going down it is not too bad. There is some exposure. There are some switchbacks up there, but by the time you get there, that shouldn't bother you that much. So if you need a challenge section, that might be one to consider because it doesn't add that much time to it. It's shorter, as you can see on the map. But by the time you get through all those switchbacks and stuff, I think it's reasonably quicker to do the regular version. Here's the rub, though. There is an opportunity for you to get a bonus point. If you just need to point, you don't necessarily need a challenge section by doing a loop that is equally scenic and much less technical later in the day. So that's something for you to consider there. So, if you need a challenge section, it's not a bad one to do if you get there early enough in the day. But if you just need a point, you don't necessarily need a challenge section, maybe this bonus section coming up would be better for you to do. At any rate, you are going to eventually end up at Ulysses Lookout, no matter which way you go, whether you come down Ditch Creek or whether you come down Hughes Creek. The Hughes Creek Trail, the regular trail, I should add, you get right around, I think it's 60 XYZ 34. Coming down to 34, you just basically go down this hill. It's hard to find a trail there. There's a big grassy meadow. The trail kind of goes down through some trees and rocks. It's well marked, and all of a sudden, just above 60 XYZ 34, trail kind of ends. There's just a big meadow there. Just go straight down the hill, and you'll T-bone the trail. You can't miss the Hughes Creek Trail. But at any point, either way, you're going to eventually end up at Ulysses Lookout. That is another challenge point. It's a really nice place to take a few photos. And then you're going to head down. You're going to hit 93 again. So here's what I did this year that made the day shorter. Last year, everybody turned left at 93 and went up to Givensville and did a really nice, great big loop that took you up to the Continental Divide Trail, came down at Big Hole Pass, and then eventually wound its way back down to, what's the name of that creek? It's not Sheep Creek. It's the one to the north of it. Lick Creek. So we did this great big loop. It was about a 20-mile loop up through Givensville, up to the Continental Divide Trail, and then down to Lick Creek. I made that a bonus section this year. So it's really going to cut a lot of time off your day if once you hit 93, you turn to the rider's right, head south, and go to 60 XYZ 48 and just ride it out the rest of the day. If you hit that road by 2 in the afternoon, which is about the time I think you should be there, 2 or 3, something like that, you're going to be back in at North Fork easily by 6 or 7, because we cut off something that's not that hard, but it was kind of long. So this would be my thinking. If I got there after 2 or maybe 3 at the latest, I'd turn right. If I got there earlier than that, if I got there at noon, I'd turn left and I'd pick up an easy bonus point. So either way, you can see what to do there. Either way, you're going to end up at 6DXYZ 49. 6DXYZ 49 was the special navigation section last year. It's not this year. That trail is very, very, very well marked now. But there's a ton of waypoints on there. It is extremely important that you hit every waypoint. There was a team there whose tour of Idaho ended on that trail last year because they decided to kind of try to skip a waypoint. They didn't do it deliberately. They did it just because they were tired. But you got to really make sure you look at that carefully in your aerial photos, and you got to ride from one waypoint to the other and don't skip any. One of them's an out and a back. And so you go up to a waypoint, then you come back down, hit the next waypoint, then start heading down the hill. So I really like that trail a lot. Powder Gulch is the name of the trail. It's a new trail that we cut in a couple of years ago. It's a wonderful, wonderful trail. One of the best views along the entire tour is up at the top, and there is a challenge point up there. You're going to come down into Sheep Creek. Real rocky, kind of steep at the bottom, but you're going in the right direction. You sort of turn left and head east, and then you go up and you start sort of side hilling around to head up Sheep Creek where it starts getting steep. So you're going around Eagle Mountain to the south. And I got to tell you, there's some thriller side hiller out there, or thriller side hilla, as I call it. It's a simple trail. It's really easy. It's not incredibly technical, but man, it's a long way down to freaking Sheep Creek when you're up there. The one thing you do have to watch for is a lot of pack horses do it. So there are some places where the horses have kind of washed the trail out a little bit. So when you go around corners sometimes, you got to be a little bit careful because you'll see a washout in the trail. And if your bike did get tumbling down off that side hill, it'd be a long way. You wouldn't be hurt, but you might have a difficult time getting your bike back up on the trail. It's one of those kind of things that looks a lot more dangerous than it is. You're not going to go very far if you take a tumble, but man, it's sure an impressive looking distance down into Sheep Creek. So you head down to waypoint 75 and 76, and you're in a creek bottom again. It's really pretty down there. There's an old cabin and some stuff down there that's kind of cool. You're going to head south past 77, 78. It's a little bumpy in there. The part where it's in the creek is kind of okay, but it starts to climb up around between 78 and 79. It's a little bumpy getting up out of it. It's a little hard to find your way around 80 and 81, and I put a few waypoints in there to try to help you out. It's a well-marked trail, but there's a lot of weird trails that kind of go off there, and it's easy to get suckered off on the wrong thing. And right around, what is it? I think it's 82, you actually run into a road. It's a horrible road. It's got basketball-sized rocks everywhere, but at least you're on a road, and it's fairly easy to follow. You ride that uphill, and you're going to come to Stein Mountain, or maybe it's Steen Mountain, I think. Big lookout in Steen Mountain. It's a really spectacular lookout. The guy that's always in there, he's from Idaho Falls. He's cranky as hell, so don't talk to him. He won't take your picture if you ask. But you're going to ride. We used to have people come up that trail, but we decided again to give everybody a break, and you're going to start going down the trail. I think we started that last year. We're going to continue that this year. It's an awesome trail. And the thing about it is it's kind of pretty good granite in that area, so there's not a lot of erosion from people riding up it. But locals never ride up that trail. Everybody rides down it because it gains 1,000 feet a mile for about 3 miles. It's a remarkably steep trail. So you're going to head down. It gets steep right off the back of the lookout. I mean, right away, you are on your brakes going down this trail. It's completely awesome. The trail is a little indistinct in a couple of spots, and as you're riding downhill, if the trail looks like it disappears, look off to the rider's right, because a couple of times, now I don't know why it does this, but a couple of times it ducks down off the ridge into the trees on the rider's right. So if you're paying really close attention, you'll notice when it swings into the trees, but sometimes you're not. You're kind of blasting down through there, and you'll blow past those places, and all of a sudden you're in weeds and there's no trail there. Back up a little bit and see if the trail ducked off into the trees on the rider's right. That's always where it goes. You'll eventually get down into a meadow. You go down one last steep section. You're kind of in a little saddle down there. It's flat. And then the trail takes off to the left. Instead of going straight, you're in a little saddle. And it looks like maybe you should just go straight up out of the saddle, and there is an indistinct trail there. But when you get into that saddle, the first flat spot you're at coming down off that ridge, or the first, I should say, big flat spot. It's an obvious little saddle because there's an uphill if you keep going straight ahead. You want to look to the rider's left. It's at about 11 o'clock, and you might have to get off your bike and walk around a little bit because it's really hard to see when you're on the bike sometimes. And last time I was there, I got off and walked around and found it in like 10 seconds once I got off the bike. But you're going to go down to the left, head down into some trees. There's some side hilling, but it's not nearly as exciting as what you have done. And it will eventually take you down to a road. You T-bone a road down around 60 XYZ 91, and you take a nice, great big road down Steen Gulch. You come back out down at Sheep Creek, the same road you were on earlier, but you're about a mile or so farther to the west. You take that to the west out to Highway 93, and then you ride 5 or 6 miles back down to North Fork. Again, if you don't do the challenge section and you don't do the bonus section, you should easily be back at North Fork by 5 or 6 in the afternoon. But depending on your speed, once again, if you need a challenge section, the day 6 is one of the nicer ones in my opinion. And if you're thinking about poaching a bonus, I'd think hard about that bonus section because it's very easy. It's not technical at all. It just adds a lot of time. And again, I wanted to get you into North Fork earlier, and a lot of people last year got really dehydrated. You're on a lot of exposed ridges, so it's really easy to wear yourself out just in the sun. Riding's not that hard, except for a couple of spots, which we've talked about. But a lot of people said they ran out of water, so I cut out a whole bunch of it and made it a bonus section, so there you go. All right, so questions about day 6, questions about anything else. We got about 15 minutes here, so I'll take questions right now, and if I don't see any, I'll see you next week. Jeff, North Fork has laundry facilities, good to wash clothes. Amen. North Fork is one of the nicest places you're going to stay in the tour. I really like those people up there. They've treated me well. And it's another place like Kalen's place. I want to get you in early enough that you can get a good meal. By the way, there's several restaurants. There's a great pizzeria a few miles north, and if you want pizza, they'll even tell you how to get there. They're really good at sending you to other facilities in the area if you have a special need or a special request. But they've got good laundry facilities there. The rooms are really nice. They do serve some food there. Last year it was shut down a little bit because of COVID. I think this year they may open the restaurant completely back up. But there's a couple of great restaurants that are within easy riding distance of North Fork. And if you like pizza, the pizzeria about a mile and a half north up 93 is dynamite. It'll knock your eyes out. Let's see. If you had to abandon a T1 attempt due to mechanical or something, could you start another T1 attempt later in the season if there was time and energy? Absolutely. I've done that before. I've gotten 3 or 4 days into one. Something happened, and I went back and did it again a few months or a month. You can't do it a few months, but I went back a few weeks later and did it again. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you got to start all over. You got to start from the beginning. There was a team last year that abandoned the tour on day 5, and I thought they were going to do that. I thought they were going to come back over the Labor Day holiday and try it again, but they couldn't make it back. Anybody else? The reason that I do this every Monday night is so that I'll answer any question anybody wants on Monday night. So if you want to put questions straight to me, Monday night is the time to do it. I get a lot of PMs and stuff. I looked today, and I've got something like 15 PMs. When you combine Instagram, 3 or 4 Facebook pages, it's nuts. I get PMs every single day. And as I get to I'll answer them as I get to them if I see them. But the best way for you to put a question to me is every Monday night, PBR Monday. I know not everybody can be here on Monday night, but that's one of the reasons I do this, so that I can answer any questions that come up. All right, anybody else with a question about day 6, anything else? Challenge point rules, motorcycles, stuff you're going to carry. All right. Well, next week, we're going to talk day 7. Day 7 is a pretty simple day. So I think what we will do next week is we might combine day 7 and day 8. And then I think the following week we'll combine day 9 and day 10, because in both cases, day 7 is, we can talk about that in 15 or 20 minutes. So we'll do day 7 and day 8 next week. Then the following week, we'll do day 9 and day 10, because day 10 is pretty simple too. So that way, by the time the 1st of June rolls around, we'll have gone through every day. And then from June on, we could just talk about equipment and changes in the trails and things to expect this year. Okay. Fuel mileage is a big concern for me. KTM 500 EXC with a 4-gallon tank. You're going to have to carry a couple of giant loot bags. Just carry a couple of those fuel bags. I have a really big tank for my 450. I had a 7-gallon, but I didn't like it. So I went back to the 4.6, and I carried 2 of the 1-gallon giant loot bags, and I got through everything just fine the last time I did it. If I were going to do it again, I think I might carry 2 of the 2-gallon bags. I'd go with a little bit extra capacity, just because the 1-gallon bags, you got to fill them pretty full, and when you open them up, it's hard to keep some of that gas from shooting out. If you get the 2-gallon bags, you don't have to fill them up as much. Share your jetting on a CRF 450X. Rich as you want to make it. A rich bike is a happy bike. Those things make plenty of power. You just absolutely don't need to run the thing lean at all. So, my bike is not like everybody else's bike. I have a different cam in mine. I have the R cam, and I had some special work done on the heads and the valves. So my particular jetting would not be useful to you. But what I'll tell you this is just run the thing rich. If you run it rich, the thing will run cooler. the Trail Tech fan on my 450 rarely comes on. This ride we just did in the Mojave a few weeks ago, it was 95 degrees out there, and the fan kicked on one time on the second day. Or at least that was the only time I heard it kick on. So that 450 run's cool, but it's because I have it jetted to run incredibly rich, and every time I go somewhere, I fiddle with it a little bit to make sure it's running rich. Can you explain the bonus section DD and DB and DA7? Let me look. Well, A is there's up there, the A and the B bonus sections are just two different loops, and they're both really good. I think the B is better than the A. The B was on the regular route last year. The A was a bonus section last year. They're both pretty cool. If it were me, I don't know that I would do B. I think I would just do A. A is the better of the two. So if you go to Givensville, go up and just do the A loop. Don't do the, is that right? Yeah. Do the A loop, and then the A loop runs into the B loop up on the Continental Divide Trail, and take it around that way. But don't do the big loop that goes up towards Anderson Mountain. It's nice. I like it a lot, but it's slower. It's a lot longer. And the scenery's not better than it is on the A loop. So if you look on the map that I have on Motorcycle Jazz, take the A loop that goes right between the N and the T and mountains up there. And that's the one to do. Is there a preference for send intervals? Yeah, the default, I think, is 10 minutes. And I've always said 10 minutes is fine. You can't go longer than 10 minutes, but the default at 10 minutes is just fine. But you know what? If your plan allows it, I would set it up to do it like 1 or 2 minute intervals. I think it was Jeff and Kent last year might have done it at 1 and 2. They might have done it at 2 minute intervals, but somebody else, I think, did it at 1 minute. If you're doing it at 1 minute intervals, I would accept that. If you lost part of your track or something and your PLB were pinging at 1 minute intervals and you lost part of your track, I would accept your PLB trace in lieu of a track. You know, your PLB is not designed to work exactly like your GPS. So the GPS, when you set it into track mode, it's going to record a track point every second or so. A second, 2 seconds, you can look and see what your particular GPS does. But they're really close together, but they're track points. They're not waypoints. So they don't have all of the information that's associated with a waypoint. It's more compact, so you can fit more of them in memory. But if your PLB is pinging at 1 or 2 minute intervals, especially at 1 minute intervals, that allows me to look at what you're doing in pretty high resolution. So if you have a plan that allows it, my plan allows it, I can set the density of track points much higher than 10 minutes, knock yourself out, but nothing less than 10 minutes. That's the lowest. Damon, that might have been. I think you did do yours at 1 minute, and Jeff says his was at 1 minute. And I think that's just fine. Again, you do it at 1 minute. I'm still going to expect tracks, but if you've lost them, which is not uncommon, your GPS goes on the putts or something, or you accidentally ride over some of them, and your beacon was pinging at 1 minute intervals, I'll say, okay, well, for this particular day, that's okay. You all will have, by the way, a special number that I set up every year that you could PM me. So I have a special cell phone number that I give to Tour of Idaho people. I'll give it out to you if you make it through day one and you get to my place, when I give you the map for day 2 for the blank section out in the desert, I'll also give you this special number. I watch what you guys do. I don't go to bed at night until all the teams are in. So every night, even if it's 2 in the morning, I'm laying in bed awake watching teams. You are perfectly welcome, all of you, to put me, and in fact, I encourage you to put me on your PLB emergency list. You can send me a message. In fact, you should probably make me the primary person on that list. Last year, we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's one of the things I want to cover after we're done talking about the days, basically PLB etiquette, track etiquette, things like that, the things I expect you to do. What you don't want to do is like put your spouse as your principal person that you like. Let's say you hit the need assistance button and it's your spouse that gets that call, your significant other. Well, what then happens is they start calling me, and there's somebody in that chain that doesn't need to be there. It's better if you either talk to me directly or if you talk to search and rescue directly. If it's a non-emergency, I encourage you to just contact me directly. I'll give you this number, and you can get a hold of me. Also, make sure you set up your PLB, and we'll talk about how to do this, so I can message you. Because that way, even on day one, if I see your stop somewhere, I'll send you a message, and then you can just respond to that message. So I want you to make me your principal point of contact, just because if it's a spouse or your mom and dad or somebody like that, they get freaked out. And they think you're about to die. Bears are going to eat you. Mountain lions are going to eat you. And last year, we had a really unfortunate event where riders got hurt on the first day. I was in contact with them, so I don't know why they did what they did, but they got a hold of me, and they actually called me after they had called search and rescue. They hit the come get me button, the button that is supposed to shut everybody else out. So when you hit that great big button that you have to uncover, that they deliberately make hard to hit on every PLB, the one that says, assemble the troops and come and get me, you're supposed to sit and wait for the rescue, which is on its way. That's what you paid for that rescue insurance for. That's why you have the PLB, or hopefully you paid for the rescue insurance. That's another thing. We're going to talk about helicopters. You are out of your mind if you don't pay for helicopter insurance or you don't pay for the Garmin rescue insurance. I have every insurance package available because I never know. I'm in different areas of the country riding all the time. So my life flight, the plan that I have works anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, but it doesn't work down in California. So I have the Garmin insurance too. I bought the best package. It's cheap because if you end up getting nailed for the cost of a helicopter ride, expect a $30,000 to $40,000 bill, and they'll come after you too. A few years ago, I was working a race out in the desert in Southern California, and we had a rider pretty severely injured, and I was the first person on the scene. I have a little bit of EMT training from a long time ago when I did. I was a climbing guide and a ski instructor, and so I had to have backcountry first aid certification. And this guy had obviously broken ribs, and I thought he probably had a collapsed lung. Turned out he had 2 collapsed lungs, broken ribs, and a broken back. This guy wanted me to throw him in the back of a UTV and haul him out. He did not want the helicopter ride because he knew he couldn't afford it. And this guy, he's in a true medical emergency. And I said, look, dude, I know that it's going to be painful paying for this bill, but you might die if we don't get you out of here pretty quick. I don't want that to happen to any of you. So please make sure that you buy helicopter insurance. You can buy it. We'll talk about all that in the coming weeks. I'll tell you what I use. I'll tell you what the various options are, but make sure you get that. And if an emergency does come up, we're going to go through exactly the series of steps you should follow. But if you hit that button, the come get me button, wait for someone to come get you. Do not move. We had a team last year that hit the come get me button. Then they were within cell phone range, so they called me, they called their spouses and everything. Their spouses started calling me. All of a sudden, all these calls start coming into search and rescue. The reason why your PLB cuts you off from everybody is they don't want all these people calling search and rescue. They know where you're at. They've already sent people to come look for you. And these 2 riders, somebody came along in a UTV, and they decided to throw their bikes in the back of the UTV and take off when a helicopter was already on its way to come pick them up. And when that happens, I get the angry phone calls from the local search and rescue group, and I don't like fielding those calls. So we're going to talk an awful lot about this is what happens if something goes wrong. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks. Jeffrey Jensen, I can assure you that getting a message from Martin at 12:45 in the morning is amazingly reassuring. Look, I have been where you are at. So has everybody else that watches this. So when you're out there this summer, it won't just be me up at 2 in the morning watching you. There's a whole community of people that will be following you all night long. And now some of those people are just vampires, right? They're waiting to see if something can go wrong. It's like watching a train wreck or something. But most of the people who are following you are people who are tour veterans or people who have at least attempted to tour. And all of those people are out there going, yes, 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 yes. They know exactly where you're at. They're cheering you on. Sometimes they're going, whoops, this person has stopped here, and I know exactly what happened. I know that Damon's watching tonight, and last year I saw Damon and his partner stopped on day 4 at about midnight, and I knew exactly what had happened just because they spent an awful long time in a place where I was pretty sure I knew exactly what was up. So there's a bunch of people that'll be following you the whole way. You're physically alone when you're out there, but there's a whole bunch of us that are watching your project. And if something bad happens, if it's not search and rescue, it'll be one of us coming down the trail to look for you sooner or later. Now, we might be, you might have to listen to us for a while about why did you do this stupid thing, or whatever it was that nailed you to earth there. But one of us will come look for you. All right. So amazingly, I've managed to fill up yet another hour. I've managed to waste another hour of your lives on this ridiculous proposition known as the Tour of Idaho. Damon, Brent was watching me and came and checked on us when we got into Chalice. Yep, Brent Asper is a good man. Tour veteran, no quit in that dude. Third time was a charm. And Damon, this year, Damon, are you showing up by yourself this year, buddy? Are you a soloist this year? Because if you're not, I'm going to find whoever you're showing up with, and I don't know. After I meet him, you may end up being a soloist. You need to do this thing solo. Oh God, here's another guy that is resistant to information. Well, we'll see. If you do it by yourself, I'm pretty sure that you make it. All right. That's it. Thanks a lot for joining me again. Next week, as I mentioned before, we'll do 2 days next week. So we'll do day 7 and day 8. No changes really on either of those 2 days. They're the same as last year. Day 7 will go pretty quick. Day 8 requires a little bit more detail. Day 8 is the day that most people think of as the most difficult day of the tour. It's technically not any more difficult than day 1. But it's not even as long as day 1, but it's way in the middle of nowhere, and it's that way in the middle of nowhere that works on you a little bit. So we'll try to get you all prepped for that. Once again, thanks a lot, everybody, for spending an hour with me, and I'll see you all next week. Cheers.